Hello, this is Don Victor, author of Drawn to Win, host of the podcast Drawn to Win, the director of the Academy of Composition, and the creator of the Core 80 Experience, also known as the See and Grow Rich in Art video course, which you can find out more information at core80.com. This is the Drawn to Win podcast, where I have the incredible privilege to draw artists from around the world into fun and meaningful conversations around art and life, and yes, maybe even a little food. You can hear us each week on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and YouTube. So make sure you subscribe so you always have a seat among friends. Let's get into the show. Nikki, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Don.
Indeed. I have to... today's a special day, isn't it? I hear a song in the background playing on the radio. Happy birthday to you.
Yeah, it's hard to hide that, isn't it?
Yeah, I have a friend. His name is Facebook. He tells me everything I need to know.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
I feel so honored that you're on the show on your birthday. Yeah. It's like,
well, that's the least I could do was forgetting yesterday. So I thought I better speed this up, get it done before I forget.
Very cool. Thank you. It'll have to go down so far as number 2 coolest moment. The first one, actually, I was talking to an artist. I was talking to him on the eve of his wedding.
Oh, wow.
We spent 3 hours or whatever talking. I'm like, you're supposed to be getting ready for something tomorrow.
Oh, okay. So not the honeymoon. That's good.
Yeah, not the honeymoon. No, that will be the end. I'll be divorced the next morning. It's hilarious. So, Nikki, where are you from?
I am from Regina, Saskatchewan.
Saskatchewan?
Canada.
Yeah,
Canada. Yeah, I guess I better put that in there.
It's like, well, that's like a whole nother language. And what are you currently working on?
Oh, a lot of paperwork, it seems, but portraits are ongoing. And I have a pet project called Blueprints that I am trying to schedule time to commit to so that I can get 6 and then apply for grants, hopefully, and public art showings.
And what is this? What's the concept of the Blueprints?
Well, it started when I was in a mentorship program for a year, and we had to come up with a project that applied our purpose for being in the mentorship, and we were supplied with funds for materials, and it was a great experience. But the idea of working with my mentor was that I wanted to learn how to work with oil paint, which I had not until that point. And also I wanted to explore using the body more as a symbol. Up until that point, I'd been painting quite literally, in a sense that the picture would depict a moment or several moments of a person's life. So this was to practice that idea, and I didn't totally get away from the portrait notion, so I'm focusing on prominent Saskatchewan female artists over 65 and what it's like for them in that phase of their art making.
Oh, that's awesome.
So lessons I'm learning from them as I meet with them in their studio, kind of featuring a reference to their work as well as their body in some pose that signifies or echoes the symbolism that I want to put in the painting. Nice.
I do remember now, you sat in one of our meetups at the Academy, and you were sharing one of those paintings with us. And I remember it was like this cool triangle for some reason that I remember. Do you remember what painting it was?
Yeah, it was the one I'm going to call Creating Fearlessly.
Yeah.
With Kara Gay Driscoll in it. She's a ceramicist.
That's right.
Yeah, he had a few good pointers.
Yeah, that was really, really nice work, and I think I remember you were talking about the Blueprint project back then. Um,
Hmm.
so that's cool. Uh, so what's your story like? How did you slip into this thing called art making?
Well, I think a few generations back, there are artists in my family. As far as, let's see, great grandparents,
Oh wow.
they had a fan shop. One did the carving on the handles, the great grandfather, and he did a thing called marquetry, which is different pieces of small inlaid wood on the handles. And great grandmother did the painting on the fan faces. So it's just been kind of handed down in the family, and I've always had an abundance of art materials around and encouragement that way. My mom taught me how to shade, and I have a daughter who can draw a portrait as well as I can.
Wow.
So in one way or another, all the kids are creative.
So this for you then isn't like a lot of artists who their artistry and their artwork is much more of a personal identity. This is really a family identity.
Yeah, so much so it's everybody's got an opinion on what you create, and and
That's
you're nothing really
hilarious.
special because everybody can do what you do.
Wow, that's
My
funny.
brother too. My
Oh
brother
wow,
is an
really?
electronic systems engineer, and he dreams about going away and making prayer wheels in Tibet sometimes. So he's creative as well and has painted people.
Wow, that's cool. Now, what's a prayer wheel?
Oh, just and Tibetan monks have this thing. It's kind of round, and you roll it between your hands and makes the sound. And it's got I don't know if I can explain it better than that. Anyway, they create them out of wood. It's for
Okay,
meditative purposes. So he just jokes that he dreams about having a job like that where he can go away and create.
that's funny. And does your daughter does she paint professionally as well?
No, she's a dental assistant, but
What?
this
That's
weekend
awesome.
we got still using her fine motor skills, but she does drawings for friends. And this weekend I helped her explore using heavy flexible modeling paste on a
Huh.
large canvas. She wants to do something for the living room at her place.
That's cool. That's cool. Um, and and as you were growing up, was there like some moments like where do you remember a moment where this art became yours, not just the environment that you were in, but like it became your part of your identity, your thing?
Yeah, I think the first time was when a grade 8 teacher had us all draw a portrait of ourselves, a self portrait,
Hmm.
and people could recognize me.
Wow.
So I was like, oh, okay, maybe this is something I could do.
And now here you are, still doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's really cool. That's really cool. When you were around, I'm kind of curious, or maybe between the ages of 12 and 15, was there a moment or a story in that time of your life that um, solidified this art in you as a little deeper?
Well, that would have been the time I think where I did my first portrait for money
Oh,
when I first
really?
hired to do a commission.
Dang, that's man. I like your story. It's kind of like inspiring here. Really, what was this portrait of?
Well, a fellow student hired me to paint a picture of. I'm trying to think back. It had something to do with her grandfather and grandmother. I think it was a picture of the two of them, but she had this really tiny picture. And that's when I first learned not to take too small a reference photo or not to agree on that because your eyes would wear out fairly quickly. But they were happy with it. They had a fire, a house fire or something, and that was the only photo that they had of
Hmm.
that time frame. So
Oh wow,
yeah, I guess it brought tears to grandma's eyes.
that's Now, was that something the girl in your school wanted, or was that something that the parents wanted and kind of sent her as the messenger to work with you?
No, that's something she wanted. So you can probably
Really?
guess the price was okay. It wasn't the best. And then I had been offered money for artwork from my teacher too. He said he could probably sell a picture that I had personally wanted to work on. So there'd been, and in grade 8, there was an offer from the director of our school board to buy a picture too. And so, but that one I wanted to gift to my mother, and the other one in high school I decided I wanted to gift to my dad because it was something from France of the family heritage.
Oh, wow. Nice.
So I had a sense of what the going rate might be, and my high school teacher also helped me figure that out, what a good starting price range would be.
Man. So art was in your atmosphere, and early on, you became a mogul of sorts.
Yeah, but and yet I did not think I could make a living as an artist at that point. So I studied drafting and architectural drafting in particular. And what else was I? Covered all my sciences thinking I might go the architectural design route.
Mm-hmm. And when you went to university, or did you go to university?
I started into a BFA. I had won some bursaries, and so that covered my first semester. But then I started a family early and went down that path. Became a single parent, and then thought I would need to get some upgrading. So I studied electronic publishing.
Mm-hmm.
And had one semester left to go, and they changed the program on me. So then it was, now what do I do with this plan? And decided to get a trade show booth, and was booked 6 months after that with commissions. So,
wow, okay, that works. That's actually really, really cool. And do you do a lot of trade shows?
I used to do maybe 4 to 6 in a year, and not all in Regina. I would travel a bit with them, and now I'm down to one main one in the year, which would have been end of March here, the Home and Garden Show. And I've tried art craft shows, festivals, those kinds of things, and then I quickly found out that my target market was better in a larger kind of venue where people are there not necessarily knowing they want art. And a lot of times I'm the first, my work that I do for them is the first piece of art that they've ever purchased.
And is that more like a home garden type of environment?
Right, more like a trade show.
Okay. And a trade show for what?
Home renovation, everything house and yard related.
Gotcha. So they're coming with the mindset of they want to be in a creative space. They're willing to spend money. They're primarily thinking about their home, and then all of a sudden you pop up and you offer them an option that meets all of those things. It decorates their homes. They're willing to spend money, but it becomes something very unique and personal to them.
Right. A lot of times it solves a problem, such as like with that family that had a house fire and didn't have any photographs that were really, there's that. Or maybe they want the whole family together, but they can never get this one family member in the picture. They're out of the geographical area, whatever. So a lot of times I propose ideas to them, and then they think, oh, I didn't realize I could have that done. So
that's really cool. That's very, very cool. On a percentage, would do 80% of the people come to you already knowing what they want, or would you say 80% of the time you're sitting, you're kind of consulting them, and together you guys create like a direction?
Yeah, I'd say 80% of the time we create a direction, and I sit down with them, find out if they're making it a gift, what the occasion is, a bit about the people in the picture, and then we'll go through photographs. I call it kind of a joint composing relationship where we jointly come about a solution. I can go through about 6 to 8 albums of photos. A lot of times they're on computers now, and come up with 3 or 4 possible compositions that I see, or story settings. We usually look for those first, then body poses and expressions to build up the story. So what you talk about in the Composition Academy.
Indeed, that sounds like do you ever work from just one photo, or do you usually work from a collection of photos?
Usually a collection. I think the most I ever used was 15.
Oh, wow, really? That's cool.
And there weren't 15 people in the picture.
There was one. That's neat. That's neat. I really like this. This is fascinating. And then how long does it normally take for you to go through that process with the client all the way to the point that you execute the finished piece?
Oh, probably around 6 months, depending on the time of year. So if someone's thinking for Christmas, for example, I'll suggest we meet in the summer.
Okay. That's nice.
So the trade show requires a lot of follow-up of people and scheduling them when they think they're ready to be contacted next and follow up.
Yeah, follow up, I would think, is where a lot of people fall apart. They get that initial interest, and then, I emailed them once. They didn't respond,
Yeah, and, I find phone still is better if you can communicate with people by phone.
On average, how often, like about how many times do you need to touch base with someone before they're ready to commit?
Anywhere from 1 to 3 or 4 times.
Okay, so that's nice.
And I always get permission for the next call. I say, what's a good time for me to follow up with you? And then I'm sure to do that. I just move their recipe card file to the next month, or what month they want me to call them in, and I make sure to follow up with them.
Okay.
And if they're not quite ready, okay.
So I know you work with paper calendars.
Yeah.
So explain to me this recipe card. I think I've heard of this system back years ago when I was in real estate, but explain this thing to me.
Well, it's a recipe card holder, and at the trade show, I have recipe cards that are lined, and I collect I usually put the name and year of the trade show, along with their name, a day and an evening number, and then a little bit of information on who they're planning on having painted, so that I have that when I follow up with them. And then, say from the Home and Garden show, I've waited a week because I didn't want to call people before Easter. So sometime this week I'll start phoning, and as I get a hold of them, we'll either set an appointment to meet, or I'll ask them what is the next best time to phone them, when they want me to follow up with them. And then if I get a flat, I'll call you when I'm ready. Then I ask if they would like me to capture their email to follow up with future promotions, events, that kind of thing. And usually they do give me their email.
Nice. And then, so you have the little card, and then now you said that you move it, like
right.
Explain that to me. Where are you moving it to?
It is divided by months, and so this being April, I would move it then from April till, say, they would prefer to be called in the summer. Then it goes in July.
Okay. And then when that month comes, then you just look at what's due that month, and then you organize your schedule based around what you have to do that month?
Correct.
Okay. That's pretty simple. That's cool.
Very old school.
Well, it is. We have all this technology and stuff, but I had my dad a couple years ago sit down, and he explained and showed me the envelope system with money,
All right.
And that's what my grandparents did, and it was just fascinating, You'd like just to kind of work it out with paper and envelopes and cash rather than technology.
And some people use jars, which I find that would be a little bit cumbersome.
You unscrewing them. You have all the money in there, but then you get arthritis and you can never access your money anymore. Like, no! But
whatever works. As long as you can open the lids, yes.
So I want to stay on this topic a little bit more, if you don't mind. I want to kind of like
sure
push a little more into the business side of this. When you meet somebody at a show, and I'm assuming you've done this more than 3 years in your life.
This year was my 23rd.
Okay, 23 years. You know the science of what you're doing. What's one thing, like one thing that you see that's kind of repeated that helps you unlock that conversation? Is there a certain type of question that that if I ask this one question or if I make this one comment, it leads people into this direction, 80% of the time or 60% of the time?
I did make the pitch people next to me in my first trade show a bit of a science experiment, and I observed them, and I try not to take it quite as far as them, but definitely first thing, you don't try and call people in from the middle of the aisle. There's sort of like a acceptable distance from the booth in which you can engage them.
Uh-huh.
If you try and engage them before that distance that's acceptable, then it doesn't go well.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. That's brilliant, actually. Huh.
So everything from when I'm setting up my booth, where I want to put my easel, as to where I think how the flow of traffic will go based on the floor plan that they've given me. Things like that. I'm thinking already from that point how I'm going to engage people in the booth. But as far as questions are concerned, I guess if they come within that zone, I'll ask them if they've ever considered having a painting done of someone. And then I'll bring up some of the, I'll say, you don't need a perfect photo. A lot of people have that misconception that they need to go away and capture the perfect image and then come to me to have it painted. I say I actually prefer sitting down with them and doing this joint composing project where I get a better sense of the personalities and the places that are important in their memories. And then I'll take them over to my photo album or my PowerPoint that's showing various pictures that I've done, and I'll start sharing some of the personal stories that inspired the different paintings and the purposes that brought those to life. And sometimes that twigs an idea for them or a situation, and then if I notice that, then I'll say, is there a certain occasion that you're thinking you would like a painting done for? And then they tell me more about that. And sometimes I'll offer the idea that landmark birthdays and anniversaries are really great opportunities to do a collage of several images from someone's life.
That's cool. That's nice. Wow. I like this strategy. It's interesting because as I'm listening to you, go through that, it's like these questions. First, being aware of the distance that they are, if they're in your space or not. Years and years ago, I used to do caricatures when I was like 16, 17, at an amusement park, and we had a hustle, so you had all these people coming by, and it never worked. But at some point you got so frustrated and bored like watching people go by, you start calling out them, right? But when you said that, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I can't ever remember anyone like being in the middle or on the other side of that little road, like crossing over. it was almost like they spotted the, what we were doing from a distance, and they started migrating, kind of moving
Oh,
towards
no.
it.
Towards you.
Towards you.
Oh, okay, that's good.
Yeah. And not away from us. And then obviously when you start doing them, then all of a sudden people are like, "Oh, what's going on?" And they come over and they look.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can have those conversations. But what I like about, I'm just looking at the overview. It's like knowing your position and then asking questions that then lead to stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I listen to a lot of sales people talk and things, and marketing guys, and they always are telling about the stories, the importance of storytelling, and actually how it activates and engages the brain it's something like when you're telling stories, it does something in the brain that actually makes you present.
Mm-hmm.
And so your strategy of showing them the artwork so they see the quality, and then sharing these stories, I think is just brilliant. Very cool. Very cool. Now, we won't give any more of your secrets away.
I don't know how secret they are. They're there for anyone to discover.
Well, okay. But I think that's brilliant, because a lot of artists try to figure out how to sell their work and they don't know how to do it. There was one artist I was working with, and she said, everybody says to me, they look at my work and they'll ask me, like, do you know these people, in your work? And then she'll begin to tell them, yeah, well, this is my daughter and this is my daughter's friend, and da 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 da. And I was like, no, you don't want to ever say that, maybe if they asked that, you would say, yeah, it does remind me of somebody. Does it remind you of someone? And then let them say,
That's
yeah,
a good question.
because they don't want to buy a picture of your daughter and her friend. But if it reminds them of someone else, then then they go into that
Yeah, that's
emotional
what
weight. Mm-hmm.
I found with the limited editions that I did of my children. The ones that went over the best are if they're 3/4 profile or looking down, involved in some sort of story setting that other people can relate to. That seems to work best. But sometimes they did like to know if it was inspired by a personal story.
Sure. And,
Yeah.
it's a craft. I mean, you have to learn how to fill people out, and um, and but it's like in real estate. You go into somebody's house and they'll say, well, one of the best ways to sell a house is to get your stuff out, right? Because when that person walks in, they have to have enough of they have to have enough space to imagine their own home inside that house. But if you're
Right.
like actively living in it, it's going to be hard to sell it, because now they're kind of coming into your home, right? And so you're actually sabotaging the amount of money you can make on the sale, or the quickness of the sale, by being present in their fantasy, and so yeah. I heard that's why it's also difficult for a lot of people, just to sell portraits, not of a person, like in a commission base, but like, let's say you do a portrait and you're trying to sell that image,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like, why the hell would I want to hang up a picture of somebody else that I don't even know who they are,
Mm-hmm.
But if you can adjust that image and have story, put them in some type of story or environment or something, and they become, um, and so there's something there that the viewer can engage with, that's beyond the quote unquote look of that person.
Right.
Then their imagination can go off and it changes things. So, Ms. Nikki, where would you like to be in the next 5 to 10 years, as you're producing in your studio?
Oh, hopefully, I'll be further along on the blueprints project.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping to actually get 6 before the next grant writing deadline. So I've done a fair bit of, and I'd like to have had a public show, gallery showing rather than just commercial galleries. So that is the aim of that work. Not so much that it's sellable, but that it's got a context, and it's something that a public gallery may be interested in showing. So hoping to move
is that the paintings with the artist over 65?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's the blueprint. And so when you say blueprints, and you say that they're the same project.
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Each of the senior artists act as a blueprint for younger artists. So I'm using both the body as a symbol and other elements in the picture, as well as architectural renderings, blueprints. That's going to be sort of a tie that binds all the pictures together.
Nice. That's beautiful. And you're applying for a grant. Is it a grant from a corporation or the government?
No. Well, there's a couple of options. I was recently in Arts Entrepreneurial Business Development course that SAS Creative puts on, and it's also jointly funded through the Sask Arts Board. We are very fortunate in this province. Even amongst other provinces, we have a very active number of arts agencies that support and advocate for artists. So I'm still meeting with a mentor one-on-one too from that program, but it was like 3 full weekends of nothing but the business of art.
Wow, nice.
With different speakers and whatnot. So yeah, it was a really great opportunity. So there's funding we learned through the Sask, Creative Sask, which is more how to take your art in a commercial venue. And then the Sask Arts Board provides grants of various sorts. And then I went to a talk on the Canada Council, which has a whole bunch of money injected into it as of this year for grants.
I'm trying to think in terms of grants. Are they? Do you find them difficult to win?
I've applied once and I didn't succeed.
Okay, well then.
I applied, so I plan to try more than just the once. But now that I've taken a few classes on how to apply, that should increase my chances. And I've applied twice for the mentorship program through CARFAC, the Canadian Arts Representative, and then the last part's French. The second time I received the grant, which was funded through the Sask Arts Board as well as CARFAC. And I've applied for art residencies as well.
Okay.
So I've got a bit of practice in writing and applying for these things. And anyone who comes to me for help and mentoring on how to apply, I always say, don't give up after the first time.
Just go in and apply to 10.
Right.
Now, you're saying that you have a mentor. Did you win a mentor in one of these grants?
Through CARFAC, they have a mentorship program. They have a couple. They have a rent-a-mentor thing now, which is a more limited time frame, and you pay for the time from that specific mentor. Then there's the year-long mentorship program. And you can either apply on your own and say, these are my goals and what I hope to accomplish in this year-long mentorship, and they will pair you with a mentor, or you can approach someone ahead of time and say, would you be willing to mentor me? And then, so there's some advantage to that, I found out, having pre-selected your mentor.
Now, why are they so supportive of mentorship?
It's one way to help the growth of visual artists or artists in general. It's not CARFAC, yeah, that mentorship would be visual artists solely. There's no other arts represented through that mentorship. And then they have advanced mentorship where a professor comes from another province and will give a talk about their work, and you can make an appointment to meet with them in your studio for 1 hour. And there's no cost to that. So I also did that as well. But there's a certain amount of funding that's put aside. I was on the jury for the CARFAC mentorship too, the year after I had been a mentee or trainee. And we had $10,000 to give away, but there were far more people applying than we were able to award to. Actually, no, it was more than that. It was $3,000 to each mentor, and there were 10 pairings.
Oh, wow.
So that was just one funded grant that's out there.
That's cool. That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm assuming you would advise artists to go find a mentor. What's in your experience, like, what's the greatest value of a mentor?
You get an opportunity to see your work outside of your perspective, and somebody else can come in and share their hard-won experience with you and kind of shortcut maybe some errors that they probably learned what they learned through trial and error in some degree, and they're helping you avoid that.
Nice. And when if you were mentoring somebody, where would you say your strengths are in helping an artist?
Well, actually, my mentor, after the year that we had met, she had said, that she would consider talking to me about marketing as being my strong point.
I can see that. I can see why she would say that.
So that year she had 2 trainees, and the next year she became a trainee, but she went to the head of the fine art department in Regina and did nothing but talked about and learned about how to write about her work. So that's my hardest time when I applied the first time, was getting my head around how open and broad the purposes for the mentorships could be, when you're writing your proposal.
Now, you say that she went to learn how to talk and write about her artwork. I know that sounds pretty straightforward, but for some reason I feel like there's probably more to that, or that I'm missing something. Like, what do you mean that she learned to talk and write about her artwork?
Well, she is moving and exhibiting more so in the public art gallery domain than I have yet so far. And to further her work to the next level of that avenue of showing your work, she felt she needed to strengthen her ability to discuss her work in context of other works in history, as far as what the context of her work is.
I gotcha.
So using some of the academic language, but not getting, when you apply for grants, they don't want you to be all artsy languagey. They want to use your own language as well. But so basically she was learning how to express what she wants to say about her work in words, which is difficult for a lot of artists. She had started with her BFA as well, but didn't complete it. So this was sort of filling in a gap that she felt she was needing to move forward with her work.
Nice. It's interesting, because one of the reasons I started this podcast was to take on the challenge of, how do you talk about artwork? I mean, how do you talk about art, and what is the language that we can use to really describe it, feel it, sense it without looking at it? And some of the conversations I walk away very surprised. I'm like, whoa, like, that was very interesting, like how we were able to actually articulate these things that normally you feeling inside yourself or you're witnessing and experiencing visually. But it's almost like you have the painting on the wall and you turn out the lights and now everybody's in the dark and all you have is a voice. How can you make people, sense it, get it, understand it, feel it, or at least perceive it clear enough that if the lights went on, they would say, yeah, that's what I was thinking, or that's what I was experiencing. And it's a challenge, but it's so far been a pretty fun one to take on. So in terms, if you were sitting down as a mentor with a young mentoree artist, and they asked you for one really great thing of advice, what would you share with them?
I think the thing that really impacted me was to paint what you know and love. And you have to start from that. If you're not painting what you know and love, then you can't really communicate it in a meaningful way to other people.
Well, I'm going to challenge you with this question now. What in the world do you mean by know and love? Because I like how you combine the two, but what does that mean versus, just paint stuff you know about or paint stuff that you love, but you connect it to two?
Well, I have to have a passion for what I'm painting enough that I want to share that with others in a painting. And then I can sustain my attention painting several in that theme over time. So it has to be coming from a why within me that's important to me. And the knowing it comes through, I guess, being able to represent it authentically. Because if you don't understand or know what you're painting, it's gonna be represented in a less than complete way, where there could be errors in that representation.
That's neat. It's almost like there has to be an alignment with the head part of you and the heart part of you.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was always amazed by when I was younger. I spent a lot of time in the church, and we had this assignment where we had to read through the entire Bible. And hold on one second, I gotta cough here real quick. And I was pretty thrown back at when I realized that most of these Bible stories had to deal with artistic thinking people, be it, quote unquote idol makers, craftsmen or carpenters, whatever these words that you were calling them, or musicians and poets and all of these, from Abraham to Noah to Moses, Jesus, all these people in there, all King David, they're all related to the arts at some level. And so I was like, I wonder where this occurred in this history, or whatever you want to call it. And there's this beautiful scripture called Exodus 31. And what was amazing about it was there's this, I call it personally, I call it the art passage of the Bible. And it says something along the lines that there was this guy in this one tribe, I think the tribe of Hur or something like that. And I forget how to pronounce his name, but it says that the Spirit of God filled that person. And I thought that was very strange because at least up to that point, the only time I ever saw that word was when in Genesis we're talking about Adam, and it says that, God gave him breath, that type of approach. Everywhere else, it was always the Spirit of the Lord came upon someone. So there was this distinction. And ultimately what it said is that because of this moment, Now, someone may call it inspiration, right? This filling of the human with this enthusiasm, which in the Greek means that God within, right? And to be inspired, meaning to be in spirit of something. And so this spirit of God filling this person, and the result of it was, it said that, and he had he was considered or called wise-hearted. And what came out of, quote unquote, that wise heart were all kinds of manner of design and craftsmanship and artistry and all this stuff. And what was beautiful was, even though the first one was a male, if you keep reading through like the next chapter, the whole chapter, and maybe even into the next chapter, it keeps saying it over and over about these wise-hearted people who were then used to help build all these things. But it wasn't just men; it was women and men, and like it was, there was no sex to it, you know. What it was a character of being wise-hearted. And so, when you're saying know and love, to me, it's the same exact essence of what, uh, and so I'm like, there was power in there. Now, I just had to walk through that, but
I'm gonna have to look that up.
yeah, it's a very empowering scripture, as an artist. And especially from a place where I stand, which I really am trying to encourage artists to really focus on design, composition, geometry, adding the math into their work, the architecture of a sound work of fine art.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where it's one thing to feel and to have intuitively know what to do. That's, I think, the heart part of it. And the wise part, or the knowing part, could be that academic understanding or the craftsmanship of things. But it's that merging of EQ and IQ that I always say, where they overlap. That viscous, what do they call it? The viscous piscis. That part where they overlap is where like art mastery occurs. And if you're only IQ, you're you know you might have great craftsmanship, but there's no soul in it. There's no connection. It's dead. And
right.
And on the other hand, you might
have a personal.
Yeah. And on the other hand, you might have this wonderfully personable, experience, but without craftsmanship, then you just, you kind of, it falls apart because it hasn't been, there's no quality to it, but it's the combination of both of those things that you just stand in awe, of great art.
So I would be curious to see you dissect Ahmad Lewis.
Ahmad Lewis. How do you spell his last name or her name?
Oh, it's I think Lewis, I believe.
And it's MOD?
Right. MAUD or MOD?
Okay.
I think MAUD.
Oh, yeah, there it is. She's cute. Ooh, interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, just having seen you, I forget the word you use, dissect other famous artists' works. That would be an interesting one to hear you talk about.
Yeah, I'm just looking at...
He's one of our Canadian artists.
Yeah.
Famous one.
It's interesting. I like her use of space. What I'll do, if you want, I have a scoring system. Actually wrote a book on it. It's called Drawn to Win. It's the name of the podcast as well. And I developed a scoring system of over 14 key factors that you could go, and then from a scale from 0 to 9. Basically 1, 2, 3 would be you would ask a question, and if the answer is no, it would be within the first three, and if it's maybe, kind of, it would be in the middle three, and then if you're if you would say yeah, that's present, then it would be in the top three, and then within there you would then scale it. Let's say, do you think she controlled her color, right? Uh, yes. Well, would you say it's at a high level of certainty? It's somewhere in the middle, or a low yes. And that's how you would score this work. And then I broke it down from 14 down to 7, and I just do these. I'll look at work and I'll just analyze it based on these 7 factors. And so I'll take, maybe 2 or 3 of her images and grade it according to my little system, and see where it comes out. Sometimes it's weird. Like, I'll look at an image and I'll think it's going to be low, and then I grade it as objectively as I can, which is pretty objectively. And it comes out really high. I'm like, what? And then you see an image that you think would be high, and then it's like, oh, it's really low, and what's cool about the grading system is I have it broken down into heart, head, and hand. And so the head parts are more like, well, does it have structure? Does it have color saturation? Like, the things that you can measure and adjust, and it's much more of a thinking thing. But then,
sort of like the aesthetics of beauty.
Yeah, and so then, and then the other section would be things like rhythm and sway, soul. These things are more intuitive. That heart part of it. So sometimes they can have great composition, great structure, but there's no rhythm in the work. And rhythm is much more something that you feel and perceive. And so I would grade the work a little lower. And then the hand part would be things like style, medium, control over your medium, and that part of it. So, but it gives you, when you look at an artist and you grade, let's say, 10 of their images, it gives you such a clarity on really not the artwork, but the artist. Like, wow, this artist is really skilled in their hand technique, and they're really intellectual, analytical, logical, but they really suffer in just feeling a piece, right? And it's just present. It just shows you. And so then you know where to kind of spend your time, and when you want to seek a mentor or coach or education, rather than taking another painting class, maybe you go take an improv class so you can learn how to feel and think, act a little bit better, So yeah, I'll do that.
I think you called it reading a painting, and when I saw you do that you had asked who my favorite artist was, and I said Mary Cassatt. And you happened to pick out a painting of hers, and I gained so much more appreciation from her intent for the picture and her choices that she made visually. And then we were able to understand better what she was wanting or hoping to communicate from what we saw and the way she used line and form.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is. It's reading. And then once you can read it, then you can, it gives you a lot more confidence when you're authoring your own pieces. And I just created a course called a Core 80. And that's all the course is, because what I was realizing was I was training artists to do. And they were learning pretty fast, but I was just like, how do I train? How do I get them to actually learn this even quicker? And when I was being trained by my drawing master, he would always say, you can't really teach anybody how to draw within 90 days, but in 6 months you can really see a big difference. And that story was in my head. And so I would always say, I can't teach anybody in less than 6 months, you know? Um, and then one day I woke up and I realized, wait a second, he was teaching people how to draw. I'm not teaching people how to draw. I'm teaching them how to see and read and design, which is a different thing. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was like, that's what he said, but is it true? Can I really teach people this in a shorter amount of time? And, and I will say confidently in 30 days through my course, you will never see artwork the same way again. I mean, you go through 145 drills, right, of masterworks,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll walk into a gallery and it's just like,
Yeah, I think that would give so much more appreciation to when I take a group and visit the
mm-hmm.
Louvre or the d'Orsay, for
Now you
example.
do that, right? You take people on
Yes.
tours, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I'm working on my third trip to France and third trip to Cuba and the second one to Cypress Hill, Saskatchewan, where I was a guest artist in residence. So I
Mm-hmm.
know the hiking trails really well.
So how
And
did
while
you
we're on these trips, we plein air paint.
really? That's awesome. Like, how did you get into that?
Let's see here. A couple of things kind of happened at once. I was teaching a class called the Cafe Sketchbook Tour.
Mm-hmm.
So I was taking things I learned about my own sketchbook and how to capture ideas and turned it into an 8-week class where we went to a different coffee house every week and sat
That's so
outside and
awesome.
enjoyed our sketchbook. And everybody said by the end of it, it became a socializing, eating, drinking club with some art in it. And everybody said, this was fun. We should do this in France. You should do this in France. So that's how that started. And because I had been a guest artist in residence in Cypress Hills, which was also a Sask Arts Board funded Art in the Park program, my job for 6 weeks of the year between May and September for 3 years was to hike and paint the park, to have some open studio time for visitors to the park to view the work, and then I would teach a couple of workshops on a weekend to
Mm-hmm.
those who were interested. And from that, I gained the interest in plein air painting. So the combination of those two things is how that all evolved.
I love that. I love that. I was actually talking to an artist out of Canada. Um, she was suggesting that we do like a little tour down there where I live in Lancaster. And we were trying to figure out what we would teach. And we came up with that idea of just sketching um, and teaching, working with people to see and interpret and feel, not render and draw necessarily, but just learning how to capture the essence of what it is that they're looking at in the sense,
Mm-hmm.
maybe from a sense of a story or sensation. So I love that you did that and that you do that, and that it's now taking you to these really cool places around the world. That's
And
really
yeah, I
exciting.
get to connect with artists from those countries too, which I find what I really find exciting about it is that it's shrinking the world for those who go with me.
Mm,
Now, people in Cuba aren't just an abstract concept, which they can remain if you go to an all-inclusive resort. We're staying with
yeah.
Cuban people in their homes, actually spending time with the local artists. And so you take those people back in your heart and carry them
Mm-hmm.
throughout the year. And now you feel connected in a heart way with that country and the people there rather than just going as a visitor.
That's awesome. Man, I love that. That's so cool. I'll have to take a look at these dates and things, and um, that would be really cool.
That would be fun to have you along.
I started with one of my students. She was going to go to the Met. She just moved back to India, and but before she went to move back about 2-3 months ago now, she went up to New York with her family, and she wanted to go to all these museums. And she's like, John Victor, I want to go here, 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 and here. What should I do? And I'm like, just go to one. If you're going to be there for a couple days, just pick one and go there every day. And so what I told her to do is go and get a piece of plexiglass and some dry eraser markers.
Mm-hmm.
And she had a blast, and she bought one for her daughter, who's about 5 years old. And I have this beautiful picture her husband took of them while she's holding up the plexiglass and drawing on it so that she can then see the architecture underneath the paintings. Mm-hmm. Her daughter's doing the same thing, it's such a cool photo. It's such an amazing one conversation starter with people, but just to be able to go there and feel that, it's one thing to draw what you're looking at, but to lay something over and begin to trace and pull lines out and do little quick measurement things. And it's just very fascinating to unlock what's underneath the invisible that's underneath it all. Mm-hmm. And, one of my friends sent me a quote this morning that said something like, when the heart is pure or right, then you see something like you see correctly. And what you realize is that everything that's essential is invisible. And, right. And so it's one of the things we often say is that we're teaching you to see the invisible. And,
right.
So that, I would love to, I'll look at that and see, when the dates and things are. And, that would be a fascinating experience. And I really love the idea of the cafes. It was funny when I was in Puerto Rico, we went down on for like a week, and my buddy and I at the end of the week were like, we're not going back, we're just staying. And so we stayed for like 3 years. And I got and I got this job in an ad agency. Now, I didn't speak Spanish. I still don't speak Spanish, but for 3 years I worked in this ad agency. And the problem is when you would go home, it would take like an hour and a half to get home because the traffic was so bad. Without any traffic, it was like a 20-minute ride, to get home. And so while I was working the ad agency, I felt like I came to this understanding like, oh, whoa, I'm not worried about being a starving artist. I'm worried about artistically starving. And it was a time in my life where I realized like, oh, I'm doing graphic design, this kind of stuff, but this isn't art. I'm not actually being paid to design. I'm being paid to assemble stuff. And so I needed an outlet. And so I came up with this idea, like, why don't I just go to a local cafe while the traffic is, jammed up, and I'll just sketch. And I started doing that. And it was just my outlet to draw, this creative outlet. And then like, it didn't take too long, but I kind of became famous in this San Juan area. And one day we actually had this buyer. He was this Chinese guy, and he would like buy this stuff from China, and he was one of the people connected to the agency. And he came in and they were giving a tour to him, and they said, yeah, this is Vargas. He's like, Vargas? He's like, do you do the sketches in the cafes? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, man, my friend has one of your drawings like hanging in her bathroom, And I'm like, oh, what's up with the bathroom thing? Why does all my drawings end up in people's bathrooms?
There they can sit and really contemplate. Anyway.
Exactly. Thinking. That's funny. But yeah, so I have a deep appreciation for cafe drawing, and that was such a powerful. I'm actually, I'll tell you this crazy story. I met this lady from Venezuela, and she had this little daughter. I guess she was probably about 4 years old at the time, and man, this is probably, I don't know, 15 years ago, and she was the coolest little girl, and she was sitting there with her mom, and I was I'd sketch people. So I sketched them, and I would rip it out and I would give it to people. That's what I would do. I would give these images away. Um, and so we kind of hit it off, and we were talking and whatnot. And one day, I wanted to extend what I call the power of the sketch to Mariana, the little girl. And so I had Mariana draw like 10 little flowers, just little flowers on a piece of paper, and then we cut them up. And as her mom and I watched her, we told her to go out into the mall and the little cafe and give the little flowers to anybody that she wanted to give the little flowers to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, she was terrified, and I'm like, no, no, go, we're watching you, And finally, she built up the courage to go. And there was this little tiny old lady. I don't know how old she was, probably in her 80s. And she was just sitting there, and she was all grumpy and like, like, you know. And little Mariana walks up to her, this little 4-year-old, and gives her this little flower. And I swear, 30 years just fell off that woman's face, like in a moment.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, and then and so Mariana goes out and she sees this young girl, teenager, dressed in, I guess back then they called it goth, like white faced and everything else is black, and she gives her this little flower, and the girl just turned into this beautiful young woman. Like she just beamed with joy, and was so appreciative of this little flower. It was such a cool thing to witness. And I actually still have one of the flowers. I framed it. And a couple of years ago, her mom came up. It was probably 10, 12 years later. And she came up to my house, and it was in this little frame. And she's like, I wanted to cry when I saw that, But, now Mariana is, I don't know, college or whatever now. But the power of doodling and sketching and connecting with other human beings in a space like that, I'd encourage every artist to give themselves time. Take 3 months and just do it on a consistently, and maybe even do what I did, which was just give it away. Just give it away.
To give yourself permission to do that and not be afraid of the outcome of what you create. That seems to be the big hurdle for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
You going out and painting outdoors or at a cafe where people can see what you're doing. But we now have a group too that meets once a week. And it's a private Facebook group that I've set up. And Thursdays, 1 to 3 p.m., we go out, and different members will suggest the next place for the next week. And it's just become a weekly practice as people can join in. They're there, and the group is growing. There's no formal instruction, but we learn from each other. And it's mostly just giving yourself the permission to collect visual imagery and kind of refill that creative well too, that we can abuse sometimes as artists if you're trying to live from your art.
Yeah. And now with that group, is it people from around the world and they're going out on that day, or is it like a local group?
What a neat idea. No, I hadn't thought of that, but I do have people from different places in the Facebook group who watch what we're doing. But we're meeting in person with people probably as far away as 45 minutes from Regina.
Nice.
Some of them come in for that.
Have you ever heard of the Urban Sketchers?
Yeah, we've registered our group with them so that if somebody is traveling, they can come and join our group and see where we're meeting that week.
That's so cool. And with technology today to connect people, you could book something on Airbnb and and go into a little area, so you're not just in one of those resorts like you were saying, and really just I like doing that kind of stuff because it allows me to feel who I am in a different space, and and the energy is different, the architecture is different, the people are different, everything's so different, and it's giving your hands and your eyes a whole new taste, flavor, experience, and
it's so immediate. You don't have time to mull over things like you do. Well, you should still be looking more than you draw, but it's different than working from a two-dimensional subject, photograph, whatever.
Indeed. Yeah, that's so cool. So, Nikki, let me ask you, as you're in your studio, you're working in your business. I'm going to call it a business because I love this conversation because you're just really, in a very understated way, very calm way. My respect for you is just like growing in leaps and bounds because, it's because you have this clarity of the business aspect of it. And, I have no idea how successful it is or not successful, but it's irrelevant. It's there. And it's interesting. I find you interesting because I think a lot of artists are spending time trying to prove that they're an artist. And maybe because of your background, this history that you've had of just kind of growing up in this energy, that's not your issue, and maybe it is, but I don't.
Just am.
Yeah, exactly. And so therefore now you get to put your energy and focus into something else, and it may be, mastering this business aspect and the sales and I like that, you come across with just a very calm confidence on it. But if anyone's seen your work, you deliver and you can defend yourself. I mean, like your work, it's there, So that's why, I mean, I've seen artists who are business people, but their work sucks, right? And they're just really good at marketing, sales, and I just feel like they're conning people, to be quite honest. But when you see someone who can do both, that's it's a remarkable, and it's just a beauty. It's a beautiful thing. It's just beautiful.
Well, that's a real compliment coming from you. Thank you.
Well, so let me ask you, in your network, in your agency, who are 2 or 3 people or services that you would give a shout out to that help you, be you, do your thing?
Well, I've had real recent involvement with and ongoing with Carfac. And in Saskatchewan, it's carfac.sk.ca. They have everything from a lawyer that you can access for free for 1 hour of advice. They have accountant the same way. They have this mentorship program I mentioned. They have model contracts and a minimum fee schedule accessible to artists online. So very, very helpful on a business level and encouraging. And then I mentioned Creative Saskatchewan, who really helps to encourage and teach the business aspect of being an artist. And then Sask Arts Board would be another major resource for artists in Saskatchewan.
That's awesome. Thank you. So now you've been waiting the whole conversation for the most important question.
Oh, okay.
Yes, you have been. And that is, what does Nikki love to eat?
Oh, I forgot that one. What do I love to eat?
You can't say birthday cake today, because that's just... Oh, gee.
Okay.
Actually, I'm going to take you in a different direction. Okay. I'm sorry. Today is your birthday. So you can tell us what you love to eat, because I do want to hear that. But I have to ask you, what's your favorite birthday cake, dessert, whatever you guys do, that you remember, or one that you just love?
Oh, I like Black Forest cake.
Black
Oh,
Forest
not black.
cake.
Oh, red. Sorry, red velvet. That would be my first number one. You know that one for sure. We were introduced to it as a family in Texas.
Oh, really? Okay, nice. Yeah, that's a good one. Now, what's Black Forest cake?
Oh, that would be a really rich chocolate cake with whipped cream and cherries, canned cherries, and some chocolate drizzled on that.
Wow. I need to come to your birthday party. Wow, my stomach I don't know if you can hear it. It literally is growling right now. Literally. Oh, whoa. That was creepy, weird. I think somebody gotta go eat. That's cool. So outside of chocolates and chocolate cakes, what do you love to eat?
Probably seafood, which is why I love, like everyone says, don't go to Cuba because of the food being, or if you go, take condiments.
Okay.
Not at all my experience when we were there, not staying on a resort. The food was absolutely very flavorful and well made and awesome. So I don't know. I think it's just maybe the all-inclusives that are the situation. So lots of seafood. I had every opportunity I could get seafood. I was enjoying that.
Nice. What's some of your favorite seafood?
Lobster, crab, shrimp, soft shell crab. I had that in Texas as well. That was amazing.
That's the one where you can just put the whole crab in your mouth and you just eat it with the shell.
I don't even understand how they do that.
Yeah.
But I sure enjoyed it. I didn't ask a lot of questions.
I had my first one in Portugal. It was like this. It looked like it was breaded or whatever, but I was like, I didn't know if at first it was like some type of dough thing that that they made in the shape of a crab or what. But it was a crab. It was like a breaded, deep fried crab or whatever. Oh my god, it was it was good.
And it doesn't. We're not selling it. It sounds odd, but it was so good.
Yeah. So that's cool. Seafood. Yeah, I've never heard anyone ever in my entire life say anything negative about Cuban food. So
really?
But I mean, I guess when it's this little tiny tropical island and you're up in Canada, maybe I don't know.
Yeah, that's the first thing everybody forewarned me. Make sure you don't go there for the food. I'm like,
what?
That's not my experience at all. It was good food.
Yeah, man. So Cuban rice. Anyways, very cool. So I'd love. I'm gonna take a look at this thing because I've never been to Cuba, but now that we're allowed to go,
are you?
I guess the United States is allowed to go. Oh, is it? I guess I have to double check.
Yeah, there are these things happening in your country. The new president.
Yeah, I just I gave myself the politics for several years, and then I stopped and I evaluated. I'm like, I think I lost a lot of friends and family and people I love and time. So maybe I should put my energy into something else. And so I just turned it all off. And maybe once every month or two, I'll go back and just kind of like binge for a day just to kind of catch up. And then I'm like, why did I do that? I feel ill.
Well, the Cuban people were really revving up to welcome all of you. That's for sure. There was renovations and restorations to their old Spanish colonial buildings going on. But from what I understand, that's kind of been put on a hold here.
Wow. Well, yeah. Maybe I'll have to pretend I'm a Canadian and go through that way. Or just swim. So, all right, Nikki. Well, this was a great conversation, and I thank you for your time. I'm going to go ahead and do the Maud Lewis analysis. I'm going to score maybe about 3 or 4 of her paintings. and then I'll send those over to you. And then if you want to
that'd be
have
great.
a conversation, we can have a conversation about that.
Okay.
So my initial reaction is I like it. I like her work. Has that little folk art feel to it, look to it.
Right.
And yet, a lot of times folk art, it feels unsophisticated. But what I like about her is that I feel there's a sophistication and intelligence underneath it, even though the style is much more of a folk art feel, in the sense of the style. So I'm excited to see what the grade comes out and what the analysis
I'm
shows.
looking forward to seeing this.
Cool. Well, I thank you, and until next time, arrivederci.
Yeah, thanks for interviewing me.
Indeed. Oh, real quick, I forgot to ask you. If people want to get in contact with you, how can they find you?
They can reach me at nikkisportraits.com, NIKKISPORTRAITS.com.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And then what I'll do is I'll take your web address and put it in the show notes so that people have it there and they can just click and link over to your website.
All right. From there, there's my blog and there's links to the Facebook pages, so everything can be found there.
Cool. And they can see your work, and if they're interested in signing up for the tours in Canada, France, and Cuba, they can do that there as well. Awesome.
They sure can.
Beautiful. Cool.
Hi there, my name's Lori Calabrese. I'm an artist from Pennsylvania, and I wanted to share with you why I took Core 80 and what I got from it. So I took Core 80 because I wanted to improve my skill set as an artist, right? I wanted to get to the next level. And while my art has been well received, I feel that my art lacks a level of elegance and sophistication that I want it to have. And I knew to get to that level, I would have to improve my composition and design skills. So I enrolled in Core 80. In Core 80, we took deep dives into masterpieces. We analyzed line, brush strokes, spacing. We analyzed relationships between all the components of the piece. We started seeing the relationship, that main focal point, whether it's a face, an arm, a flower. We started seeing the relationship that has with something on the other side of the painting that is not even noticeable. And it's amazing. So we drew these relationships, and we drew and we drew and we analyzed. And you saw what you ended up seeing. What unfolded was the intent behind the masterpiece. You got into the artist's head. It was amazing. It was exciting. I felt connected to masters in a way that I never have before. And I was so excited. And now I have the skill set, right? I have the skill set. I have the concept behind it. And I can apply these techniques to my work. So now I will use this, and I will use these skills to take the story that I'm painting, right? Why am I painting a piece? What is my intent? What is the story that I'm getting across? And I will use these design concepts to lead the viewer into my story. And while the viewer, they might not be able to understand all the relationships that I created, the subconscious will put the pieces together.
In just 30 days, the Core 80 experience teaches you to decode the intentional design underneath great masterpieces. Through video lessons, assignments, and feedback, you learn to recognize the underlying structures like thrust maps, echoes, and gamuts that give master compositions substance and gravitas. Knowing how master artists and illustrators compose their artwork unlocks your ability to give your artwork more meaning and energy. Enroll today and get a 7-day no-hassle money-back guarantee at core80.com.